district, you know the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be traded. And I always be traded. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them. Fish.
All right, what is up, Fantasyland? We are here with a special edition of the GOAT District podcast. We have Mike Sanda, the master of the spreadsheet, joining us today, and we're going to be talking about a couple things. We're going to talk about the very first Rotowire online championship draft of the 2022 season that we had this past Sunday night. And if you're not familiar with that, the Rotowire online championship is the NFFC version kind of the football guys, or Rotowire or RT Sports has a kind of a mid-stakes version as well. Basically they're $350 tourneys, and with the Rotowire online championship, the grand prize is, if I'm not wrong, $200,000 this year. Is that right?
$250 this year.
250 raised up. Yep,
that's right. Okay, so $225 million. So definitely worth going after. It's a lot of fun. And Theo, why don't you just kind of go through real quick? Let's talk about what the rule differences are, or what the starting lineups are, all that for the online championship.
So we have a lot of FFPC viewers as well. The NFFC is a start 3 wide receiver. It's a 6-point passing touchdown. It's also a single flex. So the FFPC, you have the 2 starting wide receivers, you have the 2 flexes, and then the biggest difference besides the starting positions and the quarterback scoring is it's not tight end premium. So it's regular PPR. It is a 20-man roster, and you're required to draft a kicker and a defense. So it's a 12-person league. And there's kind of 2 frames of thought. It's nice to finish in the top 2 and make a little bit of money back, but your main goal is you want to get into the postseason where you're competing for 3 magical weeks, trying to finish with some really, really nice payouts. So you're going to see the same players that play the extremely high stakes games in NFFC also competing in the online championship. This past season, it was won by Billy Wazowski, who's been several times, I believe a 3-time guest now of the GOAT District, and also a league mate with Mike and I. And I know you competed against Billy a number of times as well, Dan. He took it down this year, and I believe the runner-up was Danny Mueller, who has also been a guest of the GOAT District. So some terrific players have won this competition, and it draws some of the best players in fantasy football. And we have a great player on with us today in Mike Sanda, a highly successful NFFC player. I've competed against him in many leagues, and I appreciate talking with him in the offseason and picking his brain because he is an extremely analytical guy, and he's able to spot value. So it's a really Dan and I split a team in this first draft, and we were happy to not be right next to Mike. It makes it easier for today, and it also made it easier the other night. So welcome to the GOAT District, Mike. It's good to have you.
Thanks for having me, guys. Good to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we'll start off, I think, by just kind of going through the draft and talking our way through that, and then after that we'll spend a little bit of time on. I heard there was another draft that started last night.
NHL? I don't recall.
Yeah, something like that. It was one of those 3-letter leagues. So
yeah,
we'll try to figure out which one it is, and if we have any insights on that, we'll throw those up there as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw the board up here so that you guys can see it. I think that's about as big as I can make it. So hopefully everybody who's watching on YouTube can see the board. If you're catching this as a podcast, what I'll try to do is I'll try to get a link tweeted out to the board that we can attach to the podcast notification on Twitter, where you can, at least if you're listening to it, you can see it and see what we're talking about as well. So, but just to kind of start things off, Theo and I were in the 3-hole, which is where we basically wanted to be. One of the nice things about the NFFC is you have some measure of control over what your draft pick is, because they run a lottery called the Kentucky Derby system. So basically, you can organize like the order of which slots you'd like to have: first priority, second priority, third priority, and so forth like that. So Theo and I, we took, I think, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, and then 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 was the order of priority that we went, and we were able to get our top priority. Because sometimes if you don't, like whoever, lots of people always want the team 1 slot. Often people want the team's 12 slot, but sometimes if you pick something in the middle, like 3, 4, 5, 6 or something like that, you can get exactly what you want as far as your draft slot. Because even if you don't have first selection, you might still have the highest priority on it. So, and Mike,
Dan, not to interrupt, but the one thing that we didn't go over in the rules earlier is this is a 3rd round reversal draft. So maybe you want to touch on that. If anybody's looking at the board right now.
Right. So basically, when you look at the board, the first 2 rounds are normal. It swings out and back, and then after that, all the rest of the rounds are backwards. So Patrick Mahomes was not the first pick of the 3rd round. He was the last pick of the 3rd round. Saquon Barkley was the first pick of the 3rd round that went through the rounds. Patrick Mahomes, Devonta Johnson was the first pick of the 4th round, and then Chris Godwin, last pick of the 4th round, and so on like that. So that's the way the draft flows for the rest of the draft, because they do that 3rd round reversal. It makes it a little bit more fair for people who are at the back end of the draft. So they get that early 3rd round pick to go along with the early 2nd round pick. And Mike, tell us, what was your strategy on the KDS? Did you end up with what you wanted, or how were you trying to work that?
Yeah, I usually try to take a shot at seeing if I can get Taylor first, and if I can't, I prefer to be down towards the back. I still like getting that 3 picks in the top 24 to 30. Plus the early 2 picks in the first 2 rounds. And I think if you kind of set out letting the draft come to you the first few rounds and just see where to go after that, I mean, you can get decent value. And then, we've done enough drafts even in the off season now that we can pivot in any direction. If we start wide receiver heavy, running back heavy, we pretty much know the player pool and what's going to be available in the mid rounds, how to fill out that roster. So I don't try to force things most of the time in the first couple of rounds. So just kind of wait and see what falls to me.
And just curious, Mike, do you have a 102 right now? I know you mentioned Jonathan Taylor. Do you have a clear-cut 102, or are you still up in the air on that pick?
No, it's not clear-cut. And I picked second several times, and I'm kind of mixing it up between C-Mac, Eckler, and I just got a cup. My first cup share in one draft the other night, and managed to stack it with Stafford later. But no, I when you do the volume that we do, a lot of times, I think I fall into the trap of getting a little bit too much player take lock. Last year I was convinced Barkley was going to defy the odds and come back from his ACL faster than everybody else did, and had way too much, early round 1 Barkley. I think sometimes it's just safer to not lose your draft in the first 2-3 rounds. And if I don't have a clear-cut guy closing out a tier, then I'm gonna diversify across that tier, and I'm gonna try to equal out my shares of McCaffrey and Eckler and Henry. It's like last year, look how many people had Robert Woods ahead of Cooper Kupp. And really, they were kind of right next to each other in ADP. Like, maybe the right answer was we should have had the equal shares of them or their players in that range. Sometimes it's more about roster construction and what type of player we need in a certain spot than the actual player. We just don't get enough of the actual player. At least I don't get the actual player right enough. So I'd rather bet on the roster construction than the player eval.
Yeah, totally makes sense. That's that's one of the best things you can do in these things is just make sure you have good roster construction, and especially if you're building.
You guys have a clear number two? You guys have somebody clear it too?
I do. I'll let Theo go. I know who my guy is.
So Dan and I had this kind of discussion the other night. We had Kevin Scott on the pod, and we went through kind of briefly our top 12s. For me right now, if I don't get Jonathan Taylor, I want Kupp, Jefferson, or Chase. To me, I think they're that main tier of alpha wide receivers. Devontae Adams I love as well, but he's on a new team. And Stephon Diggs, I think, is slightly behind those guys. So for me, it's those guys. I'm not sure who I'd take at the 102. But like I told Dan at the end of the night, if Christian McCaffrey makes it through a summer, by the end of the summer, he might be the consensus 102, and it might make total sense for him to jump into that role. So I'm kind of with you, Mike. I'm a little undecided about the 102, but for me, it's probably one of those three wide receivers, and I want exposure to all three of them because I think they're all going to absolutely smash this season.
Yep, and my 102 is Justin Jefferson. I think he's basically kind of the, this year's version of Cooper Kupp, but also because I have a player that most people have ranked later as my 102, that means I don't necessarily have to do a whole lot of reaching for him. I can let him fall to me a lot, and I can, because I don't want to end up, with like every time I get the 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 pick, and I'm taking Justin Jefferson every time. That's just it's bad business. If something happens to Jefferson, I would be screwed. So, I'm in this draft because it was our first one. I twisted Theo's arm definitely a little bit. I was like, okay, we're taking Justin Jefferson first. I don't care after that. And Theo is kind of
didn't have to twist me too hard on that one. I love him.
So anyway,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Mike.
It's funny how a lot of times when we are in the middle of a draft and we feel like a tier just closed out in front of us, like the running back 5 tier closed out. Well, rather than starting another tier and saying, my roster says I need a running back, I have to get a running back here. You look for value elsewhere, and maybe you're still in the middle of a tier or you're closing out a tier. Well, if we put Jonathan Taylor in his own little tier, that's kind of what both of you guys are feeling. Like if I can't get the first tier running back, then I'm gonna take a receiver. I'm not gonna start another tier. And you could argue that McCaffrey and Eckler and a couple other guys are the second tier of running backs and not really in with Taylor.
Right.
Yeah, no, I totally agree on that.
Yeah, I think that's a fair argument for sure. And so, I'll definitely be mixing things up as the year goes along. But, it always feels good in that first tournament draft to get the share of the player that you want the most, just to make sure that you got one. It's kind of a freeing feeling for all the other drafts because then I don't feel as much, that, I gotta find a way to get Jefferson. I can let the draft come to me a little bit more. So, all right. So let's kind of buzz through. Mike, why don't you talk through what your strategy was on your team build from the 9th pick, and just kind of talk through your team a little bit.
All right. Before we get into that, should we get the elephant in the room out of the way?
Sure.
Go for it.
So for anybody looking at the board, you can see that Team 1 has a lot of pink and blue. And I don't think it was a baby announcement, but they actually did not show up for this draft when the entire draft were on auto pick. And obviously they had players queued up because the default player rankings wouldn't have given them that many quarterbacks and tight ends. So, hopefully everything's all right and they just got busy and forgot about this. But it did cause them to take 6 tight ends in 7 rounds, as well as 2 top quarterbacks in a managed league. So definitely threw a curve into this league. Not much that I could take advantage of from down at 9, but I don't know if you guys had the ability to look ahead, and once you figured out he was on auto, did you have any picks where you said, you know what, we can wait, and on the way back, he's probably taking another tight end here?
It actually hurt us on one of them, and maybe Dan, you want to elaborate on the Kyler Murray, AJ Dillon?
Yeah. So we took Pittman, and the idea of taking Pittman was that we saw that Team 1 had Mahomes already, so we're like, there's no way that they're going quarterback. And at that point, we didn't realize they were still on auto pick. We thought they'd showed up for the draft, because the first 4 picks they made sense to us. So we thought, yeah, okay, they're there, and we just didn't really realize they're on auto draft. And so anyway, we took Pittman thinking all we have to do is get past Team 2 Hirsch, and we thought it was unlikely that he would take the quarterback there. So we're like, yeah, let's we're hoping to get Kyler and start a stack with Hopkins and Kyler, and then see where it went from there. Obviously, it didn't work out that way with the auto pick. Pushed Kyler into Team 1, and then we're kind of scrambling around a little bit to get AJ Dillon in there. I mean, he was definitely the next person that we had. We're like, we probably need to go ahead and get a running back here if we don't get a quarterback. So that was kind of the way we thought about it.
So Mike, getting back to your pick, you went with Dalvin Cook. Was there any guy that went before him that maybe you would have gone with ahead of Cook, or was he the guy that you had kind of targeted at that back end of the first round?
For running backs, he's who I wanted there. I would have taken any of Chase or Kupp or Jefferson if they'd come to me. But I did think long and hard about Devonta, and obviously that's worked out well that I passed on him. I just, I didn't know if Gordon, none of us knew if Gordon was going to leave or not, but it seemed like Devonta going in the middle of the first was completely baking in that Gordon had to leave, which definitely was a possible outcome, but it was only one outcome. And, like I said earlier, I like to try to not lose my draft in the first round if I'm learning any lessons from my past. So I was okay with Cook. I did think about Najee, but I just don't trust that Trubisky's going to check down as much as Ben did. And, I just felt like Cook, we forget because he had an ankle injury last year. He had a shoulder injury. He had COVID. That he missed a few games and only had 6 touchdowns, but he had 17 touchdowns the year before. And I do still think that, even if he gives you 13, 14 games, we don't take a 0 when he's out. So, 13 or 14 of what he's capable of with some touchdown regression and a few games of a backup, and it still feels like a really solid RB1 to anchor my team. But yeah, I could have taken Mixon there, but like I said earlier, mixing it up in the same tier. I will be mixing up Henry, Cook, Mixon, Najee, all in that range. So I was happy to get Cook there. I do still think he's one of a dying breed of bell cows. And yeah, when he's out, Madison gets the same role. They don't seem to run a committee. They run a bell cow, and it's one bell cow or the other. So I'm pretty comfortable with Cook there. And if he misses a few games, I'll deal with it.
Yep, for sure. And then he came back around with Diggs, and then kind of I guess you went about 12 picks or so, and then ended up with Aaron Jones after that. So let's kind of talk about maybe your first 5 rounds in a group. What your thought process was there.
Well, I kind of wanted to come out of the first 2 rounds with a running back and a receiver, because if you have one of each, you can kind of go in any direction. And obviously, sometimes you double down at a position, but as flexible as you can remain in the first 2 or 3 rounds, it gives you the ability to capture falling value. If you've, and I've done some, I did one draft, I came out and took 5 running backs to start, because I saw Zeke in the 5th and said, all right, I'll bite. When you do that, well, then when you get into the middle rounds, your hands kind of force. If a nice running back falls to you, it's like, I really can't do this here because I'm pop committed in a different direction. So when possible, I like to mix it up the first few rounds. And so getting getting Diggs or Debo or even CD. I mean, I was taking the best receiver available in round 2, and round 3. I mean, I'm all over Aaron Jones every time I can get him in the 3rd round, even late 2nd. I mean, this is a guy who, you know, he's shown us the receiving floor. I think in the last 3 years in games without Devonta Adams, he's played 7 games without Adams. Now, I'm going to do some wild extrapolation here. He's averaged 26 points per game, and 2 of those games are over. So, not saying he's going to do that all the time, but I mean, Aaron Rodgers is showing a propensity to get Aaron Jones involved when Adams is out. I mean, and he's not just running little dump offs. He's running, you know, 20, 30-yard wheel routes down the field. I mean, these are money plays with high points per target. And, you know, he's had double-digit touchdowns. And, yeah, Dillon's probably going to pick up more rushing work and more near the goal line. But give me the receptions. I mean, Aaron Jones could push 80, 90 receptions this year in that offense. And, you know, we'll see what happens. I think that solidified even a little more last night with the Packers not taking a receiver yet, because we were also sure they were going to take somebody. And, yes, they could still land a veteran like a Jarvis Landry, Antonio Brown, Julio Jones, Will Fuller, and that would help a lot, and they would command targets. But they all have warts, too, so it's no given. So I think Aaron Jones and Cook, I really like that start. Something I noticed the last couple of years when I do these early OCs, and this one's in April, even earlier, but usually in May and June, you can often get a running back in round 2 or 3 who ends up a top 5 running back. A couple of years ago, I had Derrick Henry and Dalvin Cook made it to round 2. And when you get to the fantasy playoffs, wide receivers are so volatile, even the really, really good ones. I mean, they still have a 5-point game and a 20-point game back and forth. If you can make it into the tournament, the fantasy playoffs with 2 stud running backs, top 5, top 10s, the floor they offer you for a 3-week sprint without the volatility of the receivers, I kind of like having a shot at it. Now, yeah, they could bust and you might not end up with 2 top 5s. But when you do, playing the playoffs with 2 bona fide stud running backs that you can plug in and be pretty comfortable getting 20 to 25 out of it, there's something to be said for that. And, you know, obviously you got to chase receiver a little bit, but I do like getting the 2 running backs in the first 3 rounds when I can. Round 4, I kind of felt like Kyle Pitts was a little bit of a gift that I get Kittle going before him now with all the Debo noise. I mean, Kittle will be a monster if he's getting more targets. He's, you know, obviously he plays so hard. It's like the Marion Barber of tight ends. It's like, you know, you always think he's going to get hurt. But yeah, Pitts, you know, and even though now, you know, Atlanta's got a receiver, but still Pitts is their number 1 receiver. And the touchdowns that he had last year, I mean, he had 1 touchdown. I mean, that's just unheard of for somebody getting that much work. So even if he loses a little bit in targets, he should make up for it in efficiency. And I tend to be an early tight end guy. If I can get one of the top 6, I tend to like to do that. Maybe I'll sneak down into the Goddard Schultz tier. And then after that, I'm just going to attack it with volume late. I mean, it's kind of the same formula we've all been doing for a few years. You get the target hog tight ends, or you wait and get the TD dependent ones and throw darts. I mean, the Henrys of the world, the CJ Ozamas of the world, you know, you can string together in best ball, at least not in this, but you can string together some guys that if you're not getting a top 6 tight end, you're pretty much hoping for a touchdown every week anyway.
We considered Pitts as well. When we took our David Montgomery pick, you know, we had him queued up. So I think that was a great pick. And you could make an argument that Pitts is the best value tight end on the board here based on the number of targets I was going to say that we expect him to, that we know he's going to get in this offense. He's already shown that he can handle a high number of targets, and, you know, they lose Russell Gage. Drake London's 20 years old. I mean, Kyle Pitts is very safe right now to see a ton of volume in that offense. And then how about the DJ Moore pick? You had to be super excited to get him, Mike.
Yeah, one other point about Pitts in the tight end.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I looked into Mariota the 4 years he was a starter, and he targeted his tight ends over 50% one year and averaged out to like 27% over the 4 years, which would have put him in like the top 5 in the last 3 years of quarterbacks who target the tight end position. So, maybe he's just one of those guys who has an affinity to not look downfield as much and is looking for that safety valve up close. But this could be a match made in heaven. And I mean, it doesn't really move the needle and make me draft Pitts any sooner than I would have. He's already a stud. Where it did move the needle a little bit is on somebody like an Anthony Ferkser, who, is now in Atlanta and is a super late dart throw in best ball. And well, if he's going to be the second tight end on a Mariota-led team, he could fall into the end zone 4 or 5 times. But anyway, so yeah, back to DJ Moore. Again, in that range, I mean, that's right where I wanted him, right around his ADP. He's an odd one. I think we haven't seen in the last 2 years a Carolina team that had its running back. I mean, that team is different with C-Mac in there. He's gonna keep the safeties a little more honest. They can't all cheat up. So I do think Moore's going to continue to get his target share. There's been rumors of Robbie being traded. I guess Bill Belichick, kind of had a thing for him when he was on the Jets, and we all like to rumor just about any free agent wide receiver to go to the Patriots, but which is funny. We like them to go to talk about them going to the Patriots as if it's going to be great. Yet since Randy Moss, I mean, how many wide receivers and Wes Welker, how many wide receivers go there and don't end up more like Reggie Wayne and Chad Ochocinco, where they just can't handle the playbook. So I don't know what else is going to happen with DJ Moore, but I mean he's kind of a boring high floor guy. He doesn't get a lot of touchdowns. He's going to get his targets, and I do still think there's a chance Baker ends up there. I mean, Darnold doesn't seem to be the answer. They didn't take a quarterback last night at 6. So if Baker ends up there, interestingly, Rashard Higgins is there. So and those two, from practice squad days on the Browns, there'll be no quarterback with a bigger chip on his shoulder than Baker, no matter where he lands. I still think the odds favorite is Seattle. But anyway, DJ Moore, he's a solid play at wide receiver 20. He's not. I don't think he's going to win your league, but he's not going to lose your league. So I was pretty happy coming out of the first 5 rounds with two running backs, 2 receivers, and a tight end. I had planned to wait on quarterback, but whenever I feel that the tiers are breaking in front of me, like I don't really like where we are with the wide receivers or the running backs, that's when I kind of feel my back's against the wall. It's like, all right, fine, I'll take a quarterback. And that's kind of where I ended up here. But we'll come back to that when we get back to further into it. So you guys want to talk about your first 5 rounds?
Yeah, sure. For sure. And I think, Mike, one of the things too is, Mike and I were talking about this after the draft. He's like, nobody really is going to like my team because it's not one of those ones that looks, real sexy on Twitter because of the fact that you don't have a lot of running backs or a lot of wide receivers or whatever, for the first few rounds. It's a very balanced team, and those teams, they never seem to do well in the Twitter popularity polls. But that's all right. I mean,
I think there's a psychological phenomenon where when we see a lot of yellow in a row or a lot of green in a row, we get excited for that, and we say, look at those receivers. And then I think we psychologically easily fill the hole at the opposite position where, well, yeah, they'll fill in a running back. There's an anchor RB build. All they need is an RB2, and this team's going to smash. And that does happen, and that's why those builds are sexier. But when all is said and done, you're going to have roughly the same amount of players at each position anyway. And, it's not going to look as sexy when you take a quarterback and a tight end in the first 6 rounds.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. All right, Theo, you want to get into our build?
Sure. So we had penciled in Jefferson as our pick. We knew he'd be there at 3. We were thrilled to get him. We talked briefly before the draft. Dan and I kind of had a running back plan. Just knowing each other and our drafting styles, we thought, this could end up being a hero RB type build, but we weren't going to force it at running back. So when CeeDee Lamb was on the board, that was kind of between CeeDee Lamb and A.J. Brown for us. We went with Lamb. We just thought it was a better offense, and we were very happy to get CeeDee Lamb. we're both high on him, and I for all, we don't even need to kind of go into that. He's a very attractive option there towards the tail end of the second round. And then the third round, our queue was a little larger. We had DeAndre Hopkins in our queue. We had Keenan Allen in our queue. We had David Montgomery. So that was a pick where we kind of went down to the last second. We went with DeAndre Hopkins, who we're both very high on. So we did not mind going with the 3 wide receiver start. Again, you start 3 wide receivers. I think it puts our team in a position to have, extremely high scoring weeks when it all comes together. And then as when we came around the 4th round, we were actually very happy that David Montgomery was there. We viewed him as a safe running back, and we actually prefer him to – actually, I'll take this back. We would have liked to have seen James Conner fall, but he went. Mm-hmm. And when James Conner went, I don't know if it was Akers versus Montgomery, we would have probably had a conversation on that, but Akers went as well. But we were very happy to see David Montgomery there. He gives us it's kind of a modified hero RB where he's going to get the kind of volume you'll see from an RB1. I don't know if he's necessarily a top 12 guy, but I think he's safely probably a top 15 guy for me. So he gives us a little bit of a weekly consistency. And then Dan talked about it. We would have liked to have taken Kyler Murray where we took AJ Dillon. Actually, I'll take it back. I missed the Michael Pittman pick. So maybe I'll hand it over to you for the Pittman pick, Dan.
Yeah, so for Pittman, he was just kind of the best player available, and we thought we could get Murray to come back around to us. Had we known that he couldn't come back around to us, I think we probably would have taken Kyler there rather than Pittman and tried to push either Pittman, knowing that either Pittman or Dillon was likely to come back to us. And the other thing is in the second round, we were kind of hoping Fournette might fall down to us as well. So, both in the second and third round, we were very happy with the players we ended up with. But had either Fournette or Connor been there, we would have probably taken one of those two for our running back to get somebody a little bit earlier than Montgomery. But still, over the first 5 rounds, I feel pretty good about where we ended up. Matt Ryan can certainly support a wide receiver 1. Somebody in the top 12, whether Pittman will make that or not, I don't know. But, I think he's going to get a lot of targets. So that's the main thing I'm looking for out of a wide receiver in that range.
And I love having a wide receiver in the flex in NFFC. And I love having 4 wide receiver 1s on their team. And I think we did that. So again, it was, a lot of players don't like to have that second running back, and I think we weren't opposed to it, but it's kind of the way it landed, and I think it gives us kind of an explosive start where we cover all 3 wide receiver spots and a flex that we feel very, very strongly about. Is there any, looking at the first 5 rounds, guys, are there any picks that stand out at you as not so good picks? Maybe we could each kind of share a pick or 2 we didn't like. Maybe, Dan, you want to take that one?
Yeah. I don't know. I was not super high on the Dobbins pick. I guess I'm just not convinced that he's going to get the lion's share of that job. I mean, he was super efficient before, but coming back from an ACL, I think it's realistic to expect that he's going to start off slow for the year. So that one wasn't my favorite pick. I thought Amon-Ra St. Brown was maybe a little bit early too, but those were probably the biggest ones I'm seeing right off the top of my head. How about you, Mike?
Well, not to pick on Team 5 too much, but the Tyreek and Jalen Waddle round 2, round 3 picks, seem kind of maybe a little close to their ceilings. Maybe a little more friendly in best ball. And if you were going to do that, I think I would have made sure I reached a round or 2 and stacked them with Tua. You're already kind of pot committed at that point. From a roster construction standpoint, it'd be interesting to see how Team 8 figures it out at wide receiver. But as you guys have said, we start 3, hopefully whenever we can, 4 wide receivers in NFFC. to get the full PPR points, and they are going to just be playing wide receiver Russian roulette every week, just trying to find a 2 and a 3, let alone a 4. Now they have an abundance of running backs. That's great. A top quarterback, top tight end. But it's funny, since I joined the NFFC in 2009, and my son and I were drafting teams even way back then, we always kind of felt like, just personally, we don't mind having our hole be an RB2, because so many other teams are going to be chasing RB2 lineup decisions every week, and it's okay to have a hole there. Wide receivers are so volatile, even the really good ones go back and forth, that I like you guys' approach of the 4 studs, even adding Dillon in there. You're not making the crazy decisions I've had to make in the past with which wide receiver 5 or 6 am I putting in my 2 spot this week. I mean, that is just a recipe for disaster. And I do think Team 8 might struggle a little bit with that. Not to mention with 6 running backs in the first 8 to 9 rounds. They and none in the first 2. They may have a hard time deciding which running backs to start also. So that's a great best ball roster. I mean, I certainly wouldn't want to manage it. I think it's going to be a challenge. I do like some of the players. I think Landry, for Team 8 in round 12, he's going outside the top 40 wide receivers. And, this is a guy that the Browns didn't want to pay him. And, he's kind of playing chicken with them to wait and see if they get anybody in the draft, in which case, if they don't, he kind of gets the leverage, and maybe he still signs there, or does he just land someplace else? But whenever he signs, be it with the Browns or the Packers or the Chiefs or wherever he goes, he's going to jump up into the top 25 to 30 immediately if he's healthy. And you're getting him, around 12 to 14 now is a key. As Dwayne McFarland has said many times this offseason on his podcast about drafting this time of year, we all know this is for the crazy degenerates like us. We all know we're banging heads against a lot of really good players, but we do it anyway because we can't stop. And if you're going to be drafting this time of year, you want to be drafting players you think can move the most. A lot of times that's the rookies, but it's also the vets. And yeah, we know that wide receivers who change teams don't often do that great. Okay, well, Jarvis Landry won't be a top 15 receiver anymore. That's fine. But when he lands someplace, he's not going to be wide receiver 45 anymore either. So I think some of these veterans that could still land somewhere could jump up quite a bit.
Yep, for sure.
Yeah, so I'll agree with Dan on the Amon-Ra St. Brown pick, especially taking Amon-Ra St. Brown before the NFL draft, before Chris Godwin, probably before Terry McLaurin and DJ Moore as well. It's just something that I would not have done. We saw last night they had Jameson Williams. So I think, with the healthy Hawkinson and Jameson Williams, it's going to be Amon-Ra St. Brown will not see the kind of crazy target volume he saw to end last year. And for me, it's a little early for Josh Allen. I think Josh Allen is a tremendous player. He's a huge fantasy asset. But when you take him in the mid-second round, it kind of limits you, especially where he followed up and took Darren Waller, where you use 2 of your top 5 picks on the one-off positions. It basically is you're going to be, and then you take 2 running backs as well. Like Mike said, it really puts you in a hole at wide receiver. So if he would have gone with, potentially a Tyreek Hill or a CeeDee Lamb, I'm not so sure that he wouldn't have ended up with Pat Mahomes there in the 3rd if he wanted to go with a super early quarterback, just based on looking at the board. So for me, I can't do it. I can't take a quarterback that early. It rarely works out to draft a quarterback that early in a tournament type play like this.
Right. And I think, kind of the main issue with that team is if you're going to do quarterback and tight end early, then you can't go heavy on running back. If you're going to pick one to go heavy on between running back and wide receiver with early tight end and early quarterback, you got to go receiver. Get your one running back in there, maybe 2 at most, and go heavier on receiver because of the fact that you do have to start 3 receivers and you only have to start with 2 running backs, and then you still get that flex where you can put anyone you want in there. So it just makes for a very tough build. He's putting a lot of pressure on himself to either hit with his wide receivers that were drafted after in the 10th round and after, or to hit on the waiver wire.
And the waiver wire is funny. It's even so. I think Mike made a point about, and we talked about Dwayne as well with early drafting. Ways to have success in early drafting. I'll say that the one big advantage for early drafters is the early waiver wire run. That first run usually is a pretty advantageous run. I know in past Rotowire online championship teams, I added Darren Waller that one year where he kind of rose up all summer long. I was able to add him on the waiver wire. I've added Terry McLaurin. I think a lot of players added James Robinson. So you get the first waiver wire run should be of a larger pool of players when you draft super early. But like Mike said, wide receivers are just few and far between on the waiver wire in NFFC. Really impactful wide receivers are hardly ever found on the waiver wire. And when they are, you end up having to spend 40% of your fab budget just to get a guy that's going to fall into it. Like, for instance, Justin Jefferson was on some waiver wires after his incredible breakout game. Dan, that was like his third game of the year, maybe in Minnesota. Yes. So he had didn't do much, and then all of a sudden, game 3 goes for like 150 yards, and people were spending 70% of their budget on him. So even if you get a guy off the wire like that, it's usually kind of too late. So it's really, really hard to make up at wide receiver. And like Mike said, running back 2 is the one spot that you can make up for. I mean, you can go time and time again and find guys that break out on the waiver wire, and you're able to get them for 20%, 15%, and kind of ride them throughout the year. So it's just tough. It's just tough to not be robust at wide receiver in this format.
Yep, for sure. All right. Mike, why don't you just kind of take us through the rest of your team, how you were, how you balance things out, because usually the first 5 rounds are sort of the ones where, you're setting up your studs. And then after that, you're just looking to try to balance things out the rest of the way. So you've got good choices to make as you're setting your lineup each week. So take us through that.
All right. As Theo mentioned, with these early drafts, you have all summer to see what else happens and then attack that first fab period. For the last couple of years with COVID, I've been drafting QB2s in these managed leagues where for many years before that, if I had a top 6 to 7 quarterback, I don't bother taking a QB2 because I want to throw more darts at position players later in these drafts and see what sticks. So I was kind of a little surprised with this draft that I think it was just me and one other team, team 6, who went the one quarterback approach. But I kind of came into this saying, if I get one of my top quarterbacks, I'm going to throw more darts later. Now, my darts in this one didn't end up being the sexy rookies. They ended up being LaVisca and Sammy Watkins. But to Theo's point, if neither one of those hit, I think LaVisca needs to land on another team and play that Debo-like role, and then we could see what he's really made of. And Sammy, he may be toast. But if he's got anything left with Rodgers, we're going to find out in the preseason or early on. And if not, he'll be my first cut. If you look at what's on them, there's still like Zach Wilson. There are 3 or 4 decent starting quarterbacks that I can get in week 1 for that first fab run if I need to get a QB2 if it happens to Wilson. So, I think this time of year I wouldn't be taking second quarterbacks. Now, in you guys' case, I like what you did with the second quarterback, and I don't even mind that you took Cousins over Rodgers. I mean, nobody likes a stack more than I do, I don't think. And you guys have 2 stacks. So getting Cousins to stack with Dillon and Jefferson made a lot of sense. And it's like, if you're going to commit to those 2 receivers, you kind of got to go get that QB2. And now you can just play the smash matchups when Hurts is in a tougher matchup. So anyway, that said, the Russell Wilson pick in round 6, I was getting a little cute there. I was kind of trying to get the stack with Sutton at that turn. And, by ADP, I probably should have taken Sutton first because Wilson may have made it back to me. And if he didn't, Dak and Brady were there, but I kind of like Wilson better than them. I think, Brady's lost some weapons. Dak's lost some weapons. Wilson's gone just the opposite. I mean, their arrows are pointing in different directions, and, there probably aren't going to be a lot of people who have Wilson ranked above Dak and Brady, but I do at this point. So I wanted Wilson more than I wanted the stack. So I pulled the trigger on him and hoped Sutton would make it back to me. And of course he went at the turn. But I didn't mind that. I took Devonta Smith, which, the Devonta Smith pick doesn't necessarily look as good today as it did last night with A.J. Brown there, because, we don't know if Hurts can support multiple receivers. But we're going to find out. The Chase Edmonds pick in round 8, Miami paid him to be the starter, but Mostert, maybe get the early down work. So I don't know, but Edmonds is a decent pass catcher. He's on I'm not sure he's going to catch a ton of passes with Waddle and Tyreek, having, such low A-dot capability and up close stuff. But Edmonds should be useful as an RB3. But, again, with Cook and Jones up top, I'm less concerned about the rest of my running back. So, I'll just stick with running back for a minute going through the rest of my draft. Nyheim Hines, the Colts have come out and said they want to involve him more. They want to throw him more passes. They've got Matt Ryan now. I think, he looked really good 2 years ago, and then he kind of got phased out last year. So, if they pull back just a little bit on JT's touches to try to keep him fresh, I think we could see Hines pop a few games. But again, these bench running backs, you're hoping to not use them much anyway. Ernest Johnson in round 15, he's my most rostered running back at this point. I do have a fair amount of Kareem Hunt too. I like to refer to it as the blackjack split. When I did this last year with Sony Michel and James White all over the place. James White was my highest rostered running back last year, and I felt like a genius through 2 weeks until he got hurt. But when you take 2 running backs on the same team, that there's a non-0% chance one gets traded. If they do, it's like splitting up a pair in blackjack. Now you've got 2 guys whose values just went up. And as much as Kareem Hunt is from Ohio, and the Browns love him, and he serves a nice complementary role to Chubb more as the pass catcher, but he gets a lot of goal line work too. Ernest Johnson is more of the pure backup to Chubb type. So from a football standpoint, I could see them keeping all 3. And, Chubb and Hunt have both missed games, and Johnson steps right in. He's one of PFF's highest rated running backs in elusive, broken tackles. They have a good problem to have. But I wouldn't be surprised if Hunt or Johnson get traded. So I've been loading up on Johnson. Chris Olave in round 9. I like the landing spot with the Saints. We don't know what Michael Thomas's situation will be and what a year off will look like for him. And even if he's still there, Olave is going to slide right into a starting role. And, if we get the Jameis who doesn't throw 30 touchdowns with his 30 interceptions, Olave could come right out of the gate. Polished route runner, and on an offense that you got Kamara's looming suspension possibility. There just aren't a lot of weapons in the pass game there, so I like where he landed. And then we get into the 3 high A-dot deep threat type receivers I took in Galladay, MVS, and Parker. Galladay a couple of years ago with the Lions was like in the top 5 in PFF's deep ball receiving, and Daniel Jones was like top 3 in PFF deep ball passing in 2020. Now I'm connecting dots here, but there's a world where with Dayball there, he gets some improvement out of Daniel Jones. They get a little better offensive line play, a little more time to throw, and that lets the plays develop a little deeper. I think Galladay, he may not go back to the 15, 16 touchdown range like he was years ago, but he could get 8 to 10 touchdowns and step up and be a little bit worth the $72 million they paid him. So, in round 10 is my wide receiver 5. There's not a whole lot of risk. MVS, kind of similar. I think a lot of people are feeling like he catches 35 balls a year. He's a one-trick pony. He's big. He's fast. He goes deep. but I don't know that the Chiefs paid him 3 for $30 or whatever it was to come over and play the exact same role he played behind 160 target Devontae Adams. So if he gets just a little bump and catches 50 balls, we get 1.5 times what he was in Green Bay, and that may be enough. Like it seems like the Chiefs learned when Tyreek, when defenses started focusing on taking Tyreek out of the game last year towards the end, they kind of slowed down the Chiefs offense a bit. And now they, so they didn't want to pay him. So they decided to replace him with 2 players, Juju underneath and MVS over the top. Neither one is Tyreek, but if a defense decides to take one of them out, the other one is still roaming free. So, this could work out for them and give them a little less predictability. So defenses can't, figure out it's either Kelsey or Hill all the time. Devontae Parker, with the Patriots, I wouldn't be surprised if he ends up Reggie Wayne and finds, wow, this is a hard playbook. This is really a tough offense to figure out. But he is their biggest receiver and their best contested catch receiver, and probably their immediate red zone threat when they're not throwing to Hunter Henry. So, but there's just a lot of mouths to feed there, and they really can't unload Aguilar with his contract. So, again, this is a lower, cheaper version of buy the cow. When you can't figure out which receivers to pick because there's so many, and that's kind of where I was with Russell Wilson, then buy the cow. Last year it was Brady. He had AB, he had Evans, he had Godwin, he had Gronk. Wow, look at all these weapons. Well, buy the cow. Mac Jones may be the calf because he's got Kendrick Bourne, Jacoby, Parker, 2 tight ends, 2 running backs, a great defense. Kind of interestingly in this draft, he's still on the waiver wire. So if I need a QB2, I may be going after him at some point. So, and then the last player I guess I could mention is Tyler Higbee. I still kind of overpunish him from a couple of years ago when he had that huge finish of 5 games and everybody extrapolated him into the next greatest thing, and I didn't. But you know what? Everybody has their price. And at tight end, what do you go? Tight end 24. With OBJ out and A-Rob in, Higbee, like any tight end outside the top 7, Higbee could be a low end tight end 1.
Yeah.
So, that pretty much covers what I was thinking. I don't have star power wide receivers. I'm going to be playing some tough decisions here. We're trying to figure out a 3 and a 4. So yeah, I get why balanced rosters don't look as sexy because they're going to be more of a challenge to get your lineup straight each week. And, but at least hopefully my lineup is anchored more by a top tight end and a top quarterback, that it won't make as much of a difference if I get my wide receiver at 3 and flex wrong sometimes.
No, for sure. And you gained equity on the Olave pick for sure. So, you mentioned the Devonta Smith, AJ Brown coming in there. I'm not so sure how far Devonta Smith will fall because I do think that people are going to be more and more bullish on that Philadelphia offense as a whole. So I don't know how much you would lose potentially with him, but you certainly gained on Olave. I like your thoughts on Galladay, Hines, and MVS. And hopefully tonight, hopefully tonight or early in the 4th, Zamir White can land very well, and you get some useful weeks out of him as well.
Yep, for sure. And the one thing we know at tight end is there's probably going to be a fire sale at tight end going on. It'll be after the first waiver run when Team 1 presumably releases about 5 of his tight ends and get some other players to go with them. But, so the second waiver run, there'll be a few good tight ends available, I do believe. So
maybe that was actually a genius play by Team 1, not showing up and queuing up all these tight ends, causing the rest of the league to wastefully blow fab money in the first week to scramble for all his garbage tight ends that he'll be tossing.
That's it.
That could be it. All right.
Crazy like a fox, right? Crazy like a fox.
So Theo, why don't you take people through the, kind of what we were thinking once we got through the first, 5-6 picks in our build. I think we kind of gotten the idea of, we were going to do the Minnesota stack for sure. And then we sort of hit upon the Philly stack as well. So why don't you take?
Did you decide on a Minnesota stack before or after you picked Thielen?
We wanted exposure to the Minnesota stack.
Yep.
Dan was on that one, and we knew that Dillon. So we knew Dan and I talked about this before we drafted together. Dillon is a great value right now. I actually think he's a sneaky value if you have a dynasty team and you're looking for a 1-year rental. There was a threat that Minnesota was going to take a wide receiver in the first round, which could have hurt Thielen a lot. They were linked to Wilson, linked to Jamison Williams, but they didn't. So Thielen survives the draft, and he's going, where we got him here late in the 7th. In FFPC, he's going even later. He's got the connection with Kirk Cousins, and I don't see a whole lot that's really changed for Adam Thielen. The new coaching staff is gonna be using 3 wide receivers a lot, and I think Thielen, at the very least, he's a real red zone threat for Cousins. We don't know how Irv Smith is going to be coming back. Dan has spoken about Thielen on the GOAT District a number of times, and he sort of got me thinking Thielen a lot. So we knew we'd be able to build that stack. It's an easy stack to build. The one thing about stacking, and Mike, this, it's every single person in any Football Guys or Rotowire Online Championship, any main event, any NFFC primetime, someone's going to try to build a Cincinnati stack this year. And there's going to be like those stacks. There'll be a lot of Chargers stacks. You'll see a lot of in NFFC. You'll see a lot of Mahomes Kelsey teams. So like the unusual stacks, I think really do have a value, especially when you get into tournament play. So Dan and I really like the idea of doing that. But we knew we would get a potential QB2 to go with Cousins, and we were both really happy to have Hurts there in the 9th round. He's got top 5 QB potential even before the AJ Brown trade based on his rushing ability. So we felt good about him, especially after getting Dallas Goedert. Goedert was the guy we were both very high on. I think that the one pick that we went kind of back and forth on was actually the AJ Dillon pick, because we both think of Kenneth Walker pretty highly. And that was kind of a funny pick where I think after tonight, we're either going to love having AJ Dillon, or, maybe we wish we could have gone back and gotten Walker. But I think that, like, based on what the Packers did, or what should I say, what they didn't do at the wide receiver position, AJ Dillon looks like an absolute smash. Even if Aaron Jones has his career year receiving wise, Dillon's going to see an uptick in usage. So I kind of like what we did. A lot of people would not like the back-to-back QB, but I've done this before in this sort of setting. I think if you don't use the early equity on a quarterback, I really don't mind, going in like the 9th and 10th or the 10th and 11th and going back-to-back with QBs. Maybe I can hand it back over to you, Dan, and you could kind of elaborate on what I said and anything else that I missed.
Yeah, so a couple things on that. One reason why we like the Minnesota stack, and Thielen was a very intentional part of that. We wanted to get Thielen, we wanted to get Cousins, and Jefferson is, I like having a stack with a team that has a very narrow target tree and has also, a really good offense. If you can find those two things together, I mean, those are the best teams to be stacking on. Almost regardless of their schedule, just because that the targets are so concentrated. So you're going to get a ton of points out of those teams when they do well. And then the Hurts and Goddard stack, once we got Goddard, then we started thinking, he would be good to pair with Hurts, and Hurts would be a good quarterback to pair with Cousins, because they're two completely different styles. Cousins much more of a passer, Hurts much more of a runner. And so we thought that would be kind of a nice pairing, because we knew Hurts had, top 6 quarterback upside very easily, whereas Cousins gives you a nice, solid, stable floor.
You're just going to need a strong stomach with both of those quarterbacks. I mean, I had both of them last year. I had Hurts in a super I was in, and I had Cousins in a classic in the NFFC. And I like both of them. They both put up points, but they both do it in the second half and the fourth quarter. It's like you'd be looking at the stat lines throughout the games and going, are these guys going to do anything? And then there's fourth quarter Kirk.
Yep, exactly. You do not want to watch the games. You just want to look when they're over and smile at your fantasy points. So anyway, yeah, we got the Hurts and Goddard stack, and then we decided, you know what, let's see if we can add both Gainwell and also at the very end we got Boston Scott. So it's kind of the anti-Miles Sanders stack. We're just trying to assume Miles Sanders away. Somehow, he gets hurt or, is less effective than the other two or something. So, we figured anytime Sanders isn't taking a major chunk of the rushing offense, either Gainwell or Boston Scott probably will be. And we liked the idea of Jameson Williams where we got him just because, Thielon's a little bit of an older guy, DeAndre Hopkins, a little bit of an older guy, so balance it out with a younger rookie. Somebody who can give you, hopefully some kind of back end of the season, a little bit of flash and splash there. Albert O, for the same reasons you like Russell Wilson, we like Albert O. We know that Wilson looks to his tight end a lot. The deck was cleared when Noah Fant got traded away. So Albert O is kind of the, a main cog in that offense. And he's been, really pretty productive in the limited amount of targets that he's gotten. He's been, just very
efficient. Yeah.
Efficient. Yes. Thank you. That's exactly the word I was looking for. And then in the last part of the draft, we're just looking to, close it out with some running backs that we thought might be able to chip in, since running back is our cheapest position. Basically with Jameson Williams, we figured we were pretty much done with wide receiver. And the only thing we did was we went back and we got KJ Osborne because, if Dillon or Jefferson does get hurt, KJ Osborne steps into a major role. So it was kind of a, just kind of a little back end addition to the stack there. Anything else, Theo?
No, I think you nailed it.
Where do you think Sony ends up?
I think he's the kind of guy that signs with when a running back gets hurt.
Yeah.
I think he'll sign with that team. I think he'll sit back kind of in the weeds until either somebody's unhappy with a draft pick running back or a guy goes down. So I think he'll fall into a nice situation.
Pretty much like.
And I think the wild card would be the Rams because we've seen Akers be hurt before and we've seen Henderson be hurt before, and I think if either one goes down, they have the familiarity with Sony, and that would kind of be an ideal situation. So he's kind of like your Landry pick. It's like a guy is going to play next year, but you get a slight discount, for him not being attached to anybody.
He's the Rams RB3 right now, but it's a good chance he's somebody's RB2 in a few months.
Right.
And then, Mike, maybe you could go back to your blackjack split thing, because you had a fun blackjack split story with your Odell Beckham and Donovan Peoples-Jones last year, and I believe that gave you an incredible percentage.
They were kind of in my top 5 in receivers rostered last year, and then when OBJ left, I thought I'd hit the lottery. But the Baker meltdown and Baker playing with the torn labrum, and that offense just wasn't what I thought it was. I mean, OBJ was nice for the Rams down the stretch, very touchdown dependent, not a lot of targets, but I thought, again, we knew OBJ coming off the injury last year, was another injury risk. Is how much is he going to play? Plus, he's a volatile person, and you didn't know, if you're just going to check out at some point. So having DPJ seemed all right, but it just goes to show that not everybody who gets thrust into what looks like a better situation necessarily is. Though DPJ could be something better with Watson. I mean, for all the crying that the Baker stands have done in the last few weeks since Watson signed there. I mean, I'm a lifelong Browns fan, obviously, and Watson's off the field issues aside for a moment, nobody should have been surprised, and Baker's feelings shouldn't have been hurt. It's not like they said, "Hey, we're going to replace Baker and we're going to go out there and look around for a Carson Wentz or some other, similar average commodity." When Deshaun Watson becomes available, you have to be paying attention. And sorry, Baker, you're not him. Deshaun Watson's a guy that he's another one now. I mean, I see why Team 12 took him, even though he had Lamar. I mean, Lamar gets hurt, and I think Watson at like QB 12 or wherever he's going now, that's pretty much his floor. I mean, this is a guy who, if you look at his points over the last few years that he played, I mean, he's a top 5 every year. If he misses, I did the math the other day, if he misses like 8 games and you put a sub in for the rest, you're probably still getting QB 10 production if he averages like 26 points a game. And yeah, the last year we saw him, he averaged 30 points a game. So if he comes, 2 years prior to that, I think it was 26. So he comes out and averages 26, 27 points a game. If he plays 8, 10, 12, 14 games, you're likely getting QB 10 up to QB 5 range at a QB 14 cost. I mean, I'm loading up on him, and it's not really just because I'm a homer. I mean, it's a good play. I mean, they spent $230 million guaranteed dollars, and you know, there's a world where he doesn't get suspended at all this year. And then, I mean, if you knew right now that his legal issues were getting pushed into next year, where does Watson go now among quarterbacks?
Oh, he's top
I think
7.
he goes higher. Yeah, I think he goes
Top 5,
considerably
top
higher
7,
for sure.
Yeah.
So, again, to Dwayne McFarland's point about if you draft him now, draft guys who can move. I mean, there probably isn't a quarterback who can move as much right now. Because and you get Brissett if you want him, especially in best ball. He's free. So it's like, all right, so now I don't have to go out and, in best ball, you don't have to do it anyway. But I mean, you're going to, if he gets suspended 4 or 6 games and the Browns can win half of those games with Brissett, they have a legit chance. And yes, I'm bleeding orange here, but my son and I split a couple of bets on the Browns to win the Super Bowl this year. And I think we're in for like $150 each to win $6,000. We were getting them back when the odds were 2-3 times what they are now before Watson landed there. And no, we don't do that every year just because we're Browns fans. I've been a Browns fan over 50 years. I think I've placed maybe 3 or 4 Browns Super Bowl bets. In case you didn't know, they didn't work out. But this is the year. As my wife says all the time, like every year you have the same enthusiasm that this is the year. It's like, that's what being a fan is.
100%.
Yep, no doubt. Theo, how are you doing for time here?
I'm actually going to check out, guys, but this was great doing this. And thanks for coming on, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yep, absolutely. So we'll let Theo go ahead and jump out of here when he needs to. And Mike, you and I can just kind of wrap it up.
Right.
Let's just any other thoughts on this draft? As far as like teams that you thought did a really good job. Anything like that. I
mean, I actually, if I like what Hirsch did at team 2, because it does have that sexy all yellow and green painted in the board. And, in our minds, if we can just fill the quarterback hole and say, Lawrence and or Winston can get him low end QB1 production. If the lineup decisions go right, then that team is so strong everywhere else. Interestingly, round 12 Lazard now. Dave Kluge's been driving the Lazard bandwagon out on Twitter, and I like to say I'm riding shotgun because he and I chat a little bit, and I've shared some stats, and yes, I'm taking some of Lazard's metrics and some of his efficiency stats and kind of playing them against the whole targets are earned thing. Yeah, I get it. Targets are earned. If you're really good, you should be getting targets. I do feel like there's a little bit of an asterisk with that when you're playing behind Devonta Adams. I mean, how good would you have to be to steal targets from him? So I'm not saying Lazard's going to be Adams. I'm not saying he's going to be a wide receiver 1 or 2. But this is a guy who was going a while ago outside the top 50 receivers. And once Adams left, everybody was convinced that Green Bay was going to draft 1, maybe 2 receivers last night. Well, he certainly gets a boost today because they didn't. And yes, they could still get a veteran, but as a wide receiver 6 in the round 12 range, the guy's been very efficient. He's big, he's strong. I think he could get a little boost from where he did last year and be productive for our rosters. Other teams, I'm not sure. And again, the QB2s, I get what you guys did. Like if you wait on a QB1, it makes sense to come back a little sooner with QB2 because you're going to, possibly have to make some decisions sooner than other teams. But if you took a Dak Prescott, I'm not sure why you come back with Carr. You can play matchups. if you get them right, you can get more points. But maybe I would have liked to have seen some position plays. But again, even looking at Team 10 when he took Carr, like I said when we kicked off the show, sometimes when the tiers close in front of you, like look right before him, Rashad Bateman, Christian Kirk, Tyler Boyd, Kenny Galladay. If that kind of closed out a wide receiver tier in Team 10's mind, then I get why he took Carr there. Like, he's not going to start a DJ Chark tier. Maybe he could have taken Tony, but if that's where his tiers broke, and he didn't like the running backs, and then I get why he took a Carr. But it just seems like that's having that high-end QB2, and I do think Carr with Adams is a higher end than we've seen. Having that on your bench is just, wasted money.
Yeah, I can definitely see that. The nice thing is he's got fairly easy starting lineup decisions. And there are a few teams like that. Hirsch at Team 2 definitely has pretty easy decisions on starting lineup, except for quarterback. I think me and Theo, other than again, quarterback might be the thorniest issue for us. But otherwise, the starting lineup, I think, will pretty much write itself. If Alberto turns into a challenge for Goddard, that's just a good thing for us. So I don't mind that either. And then, I think, Mike, you've got, for the most part, your starting lineup decisions aren't going to be too hard. You're probably looking at MVS and Parker being squarely on the bench to start with.
Yep.
And then with Galladay and Olave, you can just kind of see how the preseason breaks. But you've got Diggs, Moore, and Devonta Smith that you got to feel pretty good about starting. And then Cook and Jones, Pitts, Russ Wilson. So I think things fall into place pretty easy for you, and that's one of the things we have to remember to look at when we're coming off of best ball only drafts, and all of a sudden drafting teams where we're going to actually have to make decisions about who to start and who to sit.
Yeah, definitely. It got a lot easier with Olave landing in a good spot last night. I can kind of, between him and Galladay and even MVS, between the three of them, hopefully within the first few weeks, one of them kind of raises their hand and says, I'll be your flex.
Exactly. That's what you're looking for, is players to raise their hand and say, yep, I'm stepping up.
I got you back, Mike.
Exactly. For us, we're going to, it's easy for us to throw Montgomery and Dillon in for our running back 1 and 2. But, if something happens to either one of those guys, we may be struggling to piece it together for a little while. So,
yeah, you're so strong at receiver, tight end, and quarterback that with this type of build, you may just have to be aggressive on the waiver wire. That first running back who pops up, the Elijah Mitchell last year, you might be the 80% fab Elijah Mitchell play, because it's and I get why some people did it last year. I didn't do it, but if that's what you think is your only hole, then go ahead and fill it, as much as it costs.
Right. Exactly. And one of the things you were pointing out is, having that easy, kind of some easy cuts too, if things aren't working out, like, for you, it's Chenault and Watkins make pretty easy cuts if things aren't working out for you. For us, it's probably Michelle and Allgaier. If things aren't working out well for, if they don't get good landing spots or whatever, those are easy places where we can, cut them and put a different player in place. One thing I really like that Team 2 Hirsch did was he took Cameron Brate in the 20th round, which to me is perfect because we don't know if Rob Gronkowski is coming back. And
he's definitely coming back. I have a lot of them.
Right. But if Gronk doesn't come back, Brate is, all of a sudden he's going to have a lot more value than, what that round 20 pick.
Oh, yeah, especially with OJ Howard gone now, too.
Right. And if Gronk does come back, you know what? He's got, he can cut Brate and he can, add anywhere he thinks he needs to. Because he knows that there's going to be a bunch of other tight ends cut from Team 1. So, there's going to be some tight ends on the waiver wire.
That Team 1, Team 1, he's keeping Andrews. If he decides to keep a second tight end, if Gronk comes back, I would guess it's him. But you're right. He's dropping Freiermuth, Knox, Font, Irv Smith, and Logan Thomas on the wire week 1.
Right.
I mean, anybody who needs an upgrade at tight end, Team 10 went with Hunter Henry and around 19 and 20. I mean, they'll certainly be in looking for an upgrade.
Yeah, and a lot of people might be looking for a better tight end too as well. Like Team 7 took just one tight end, Kittle. And I'm sure that they were looking over at Team 1 going, I don't need to draft a tight end right now because I'm going to have one on the waiver wire.
Yeah, in hindsight, I didn't really. I mean, I caught it during the draft, and we were looking at it and going, "Wow, this guy's going to get all these tight ends." But I didn't really make the connection when I took Higbee that maybe I should wait and there'll be somebody better than him that I can get. I mean, obviously, I got Higbee for free, and I'm not going to have to spend fab dollars. But given what else was available, and maybe where I took Higbee, I should have taken another swing at a rookie though. But I mean, that's hindsight's 20/20, and we try to learn from each draft, and that's what gets you fueled up to, okay, if I just do a couple things differently, this will be a lot better, and makes you want to just jump right back into another draft.
Yep, absolutely. And for us, Alberto, it was we thought it was a pretty good pick. Had we known that 3 more tight ends were going to get taken by Team 1, we might not have made that pick. We might have done the same thing that Team 7 did and just run with 1 tight end. But it was pretty tough to guess that the draft software was even going to allow Team 1 to take that many tight ends. I mean, we kept looking at it going, yeah, they're going to have to start taking, the auto draft is going to have to start taking wide receivers for them.
Yeah, you would think
really it didn't.
Yes, it goes to their queue first. So if that's what he had in his queue, you wouldn't want their algorithm saying you have enough tight ends, I'm going to grab you somebody out of the default pool. So they kind of have to honor the queue, I guess. So yeah, he must have just maybe a week or 2 in advance or something when he signed up, he just queued up a bunch of players and forgot.
Yeah, something. I mean, apparently if he had wide receivers in the queue, he certainly was not. He wasn't high enough on them, so his targets kept getting sniped, and he kept getting left with tight ends because even if you load up your queue with everybody, because he may have set a custom draft order, and gone and arranged all the 300 players or whatever, and he may have just put them in order and said, I'm just going to let this thing go on auto draft. But yeah, if that's the case, then he's definitely got to look at bumping some receivers up a little bit more, and and the other thing, it's hard too when you can't set any rules for the auto draft, where you can't say, hey, I only want 1 quarterback through 9 rounds or something like that.
And that'd be pretty cool if you had like a whole profile of how you want a draft to go, and you could put that in.
Yeah, on the FFPC, they have a draft pilot where you can put in, your custom rankings. You can put in tons of different rules. Like you can say, I want to get my first quarterback by round 7. Yeah, I don't want my second quarterback until after round 9 or something like that. You can say, I want to make sure I have 3 tight ends by round 13. Just any kind of rules you want to put in, you can put them in there. And I actually did an auto drafted 28 round best ball team, which it turned out pretty good. I probably should have put an extra rule in on tight end. I did not. My tight ends were kind of like Team 1's wide receivers. I didn't have my tight ends quite high enough in my overall rankings, and I didn't tell the computer to force the issue on it. So, I ended up a little bit late on tight end, but I ended up really good everywhere else. So I was happy with it, but it was kind of nerve-wracking just to watch the software picking for me. And, towards the end, I was like, okay, I have to step in and actually, I'm going to move a couple tight ends into my queue so that I can get something here.
That's interesting. Yeah. Team 1's going to be interesting to see what they do when they dump 5 tight ends. And as Theo said earlier, the wide receivers you can get on the waiver wire. We all chase the week 1, week 2, Andy Isabella 2 touchdown heroes or something like that, and they seldom work out. But I mean, with only 4 wide receivers and one of them's OBJ, who's probably starting on the pup, make it 3 wide receivers. I mean, you have to figure these tight ends are going to be converted into wide receivers, and what's going to be out there the first few weeks. So yeah, it's going to be a complete transformation of Team 1. It'd be interesting to see. And then the money we spend to go pick up his tight ends.
Yep, true enough. All right, Mike, anything else you want to cover on this draft?
No, I think we pretty much covered everything. It was just fun to get our feet wet. I mean, this is being in April. This was even earlier. Usually I start the NFFC OCs start in May. My plan this year is my plan, and what actually happens are often two different things, because drafting is so addictive, and like you, I'm retired and we have plenty of time to do this. So, my plan though is to try to pull back a little bit more in June and July. It's such a tough time to get good ROI with so many good players. You're in the drafts every night with the same people. Not much news to move the needle until camp starts. I get why Chad Schroeder waits till August, and he's obviously had a little success in this. So, I think there's something to be said. I look at my ROI over the last couple of years, and it does go down in June and July. So it's like my plan is maybe I'll still do some $25 best balls to keep my to keep involved with the ADP and the news and see what's going on. But I'm going to probably try to pull back on some of the OCs and the other summer events that I do, contests, and wait until August and September when the more of the public comes back to draft, and maybe I'm not banging heads against you guys every night. As fun as it is talking about it afterwards, I mean, I've never looked at it, but I doubt the overall contest winners come from the April and May contests.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the nice thing is if you get something in April and May that just isn't available, later on, that's kind of the one path through to maybe doing something special with it. But otherwise, yeah, there's just so much. There's so much we don't know yet that it makes it really interesting because, like you said, we were talking about the waiver run, and that first waiver run is usually a pretty juicy one because there are players that have kind of popped since we did this draft in late April. And, but the other side of that is that means that there are probably quite a few dead spots in our rosters that we did not expect at all, either due to injury or, something else. And, so for every player that's popping, there's more than likely one player who's ending up landing with a thud.
Definitely.
All right. Well, thanks to all of our listeners for sticking with us, and it was a fun time going through this draft. Make sure you're getting out there, checking out what the NFFC has to offer. Check out what the FFPC has to offer as well. There's just between the sites, there's so many good options. No matter what you're looking for, whether you're looking for cheap best balls or expensive dynasty leagues or contest leagues or best ball contests. I mean, anything and everything in between. You can find what you want. So make sure you're checking out all those options. Ton of fun there. Make sure you're checking out Underdog as well. And if you're going through FFPC or Underdog, just hit me up or JD or Theo, and we can set you up with a discount code. We can get you $100 free on Underdog, and we can get you a free $35 credit for the FFPC. So if you are a new account, let us know that, and we'll get you set up with one of those codes. And Mike, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you on Twitter, and then we'll get ourselves out of here.
I'm at Mike Sandman62 on Twitter, and good luck to everyone this year, and enjoy the summer drafting.
Yes, absolutely. All right, and with that, we are out of here.
Goat District, the Pope listens. Dynasty, our religion, for the blokes missing. On all of these trades, on all of these plays, on all of these grades. By the end of the day, y'all getting played. So, what you gonna do next? Try to fill up that flex? Send the homie a text? That trash offer's the best? You try to make it complex, then they text you back. Now all of a sudden, they don't make any sense. Broaden your horizons, boy. Dynasty's not for the Simons, boy. These trades not for consignment, boy. Respect your opponent, y'all some piranhas, boy. This my advice from me to you. Open up your cute little podcast queue. Search up GOAT District, my dude. Pop it in your ear, man. Y'all know what to do. It's the... And I always be trading. And I always be trading. And I always be trading. Y'all try to betray them, but first you gotta bait them.